everybody. Good to
Hi,
see you.
everyone. Hi, everyone. So I think before we get started, I'm going to start us off with a little just grounding meditation, just to get us all here together, connected, let go of our days. And with the help of the beings of light, the group that I channel, I'll lead us on this meditation. So just get comfortable. If it's safe to do so, you can gently close your eyes. Begin bringing awareness into the body. Bringing awareness to the breath. The inflow, followed by the outflow. This beautiful, sacred, steady rhythm that is with you all day, every day. An anchor you can drop into in the tumultuousness of the world. And just feeling into that anchor of the breath. The steadiness of inflow followed by outflow. And on that in-breath, just breathing in peace and serenity. And on that out-breath, breathing out all that does not resonate as such. Breathing in the depths of this present now moment. Breathing out all past and future. And bringing some awareness to the soles of your feet. And just allowing in that beautiful energy of Mother Earth. Beautiful, grounded, nourishing energy. Just allow her energy to move into you, going just where it's needed, just where you can use a little more resourcing. Just allowing that energy to move fully into your body, filling you from the soles of your feet all the way up through the body, all the way up to the very top of your head. And there at the top of your head, being open to a beautiful column of divine white light source energy, pure fundamental beingness. Just allowing that energy to radiate down into your body from source, from the higher realms, replenishing you, reminding you who and what you truly are, and that you are this very same energy. Just allowing this energy to flow fully into you, loosening any blockages, any pockets of tension or tightness. Just melt in this beautiful cascade of divine white light source energy. Just allowing this to fill your being, fill your body all the way down to the very soles of your feet. And then bringing some awareness to the heart area. And just feeling that saturation of love. Beautiful energy of Mother Earth. The beautiful energy of Source. Really all one energy, which is the love light consciousness that simply is all. Taking this opportunity to remember that you are that consciousness and not the multitude of thoughts and emotions you've temporarily confused yourself with. Just remembering that you are this infinite, eternal ocean of love and light that extends through everyone and everything in the entire universe. And this is where we all meet as one being here, experiencing life from a multitude of perspectives. You could say humanity has many eyes, and many eyes, both EY, ES, and I. And these are the many people that make up humanity. And these eyes are all part of one organism. This one consciousness that sees through each and every one of you. And longs to wake up within each and every one of you. And so remembering this truth and keeping this sense of anchoring in the heart, gently begin opening your eyes, bringing awareness back into the room, bringing awareness back to the screen. I'm ready to share in this gift of sacred time we have together.
Thank you, Liesel. Thank you, beings of light. So welcome everybody. Wave if you can hear me. Okay, good. As you all know, there's now a war in the Middle East. And I know many of you are quite distressed about that. I am too. I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. And I'm going to refer only to what's going on in the Middle East, but know that the comments I'm going to make apply equally to Ukraine and anywhere else in the world where war is taking place. So in order to set the stage for these comments, I need to talk first about ascension. As most of you probably know, the Earth and everybody on the Earth is going through an ascension process. Ascension is literally ascending or rising in vibration or frequency. As I understand it, Earth has already moved from third density, or what some people call the third dimension, into the fourth, and we are on our way to fifth density, which is a vibration of unconditional love and oneness consciousness. So essentially, we're going home without leaving the physical body. That's one of the reasons an ascension lifetime is so miraculous and magnificent. Ascension is caused by light from source flooding the planet. The light has the effect of bringing to the surface, bringing to conscious awareness, everything unlike itself, which is to say everything of a lower vibration. This is happening collectively to the entire human race and individually in each person's life, whether they are consciously aware of it or not. So every bit of trauma, pain, hurt, wounding, anger, lack of forgiveness, resentments, false beliefs, anything of a lower vibration, much of which is at the subconscious level, is going to come into conscious awareness so that you can release it. That process is called purification. Your conscious awareness is necessary for these lower vibrational energies to release. They are what you could call trapped or crystallized or frozen. And when they come into your conscious awareness, if you don't go into aversion and try to push them away, which makes it sticky, if you can remain neutral and just witness whatever is arising, your conscious awareness unfreezes it so that it can now release. So the steps in clearing these old traumas are: one, let it come into conscious awareness, be consciously aware of it. Two, to the extent that you can do so sincerely, thank whatever it is that's coming into your conscious awareness for whatever it has taught you. Three, bless it. Four, set an intention to give it to the universe for transmutation. It really is that simple. Those are the 4 steps of purification. So with that in mind, what's happening in the Middle East, in the Ukraine and elsewhere, is a manifestation of the purification process. Think of what's happening in Israel and Palestine. You can look at it this way. The ascension is like a strong, powerful river flowing in one direction. It's flowing in the direction of unity consciousness. That is the overriding intention of the human species. So imagine you've got this powerful river moving strongly in this one direction. And imagine that there is a huge boulder in the middle of the river. So as the water contacts the boulder, there's a lot of energetic turbulence. The boulder in this case represents the fairly large number of beings in the Middle East who are heavily invested in separation consciousness for various reasons of their own. Those beings are not intending to move toward oneness consciousness. They do not want the rest of us to move toward oneness consciousness. They are effectively an energetic boulder in the middle of this raging river. So whenever you have a large population of beings moving in one direction, and you have a subset of that population intending to stay in place or perhaps even move in the opposite direction, it's the boulder and the river clashing together. That creates a lot of energetic turbulence. And that turbulence is very fertile ground for war. It often manifests as war, but it doesn't have to be war. It could manifest as something like famine or a natural disaster, like a tornado, a tsunami, an earthquake. Those are all various possibilities. But these are the energetic conditions that give rise to something like what you see going on in the Middle East right now. I realize when I talk about there being beings in the Middle East who are invested in separation consciousness, that could be misconstrued as a judgment or a statement of blame. That is not at all what I'm saying. That is not my intention or what's in my heart. All I'm trying to do is explain the underlying energetics of what's happening in the Middle East. Now, here's the really important part that I want you to keep in your consciousness, the take-home lesson, so to speak. Think about what happens when light strikes an object. it casts a shadow. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow, until at a certain point, there's so much light that just dissolves the shadow. I believe that humanity is now at the point of maximal darkness of the shadow. And certainly it looks that way if you watch the news. But that means that we are just one short step away from dissolution of the shadow. And that's the thing to keep in mind here. If you don't know that and you just watch the news, you could reasonably conclude that humanity is headed towards self-annihilation. That is actually the opposite of what's occurring here. We're not headed towards self-annihilation, we're headed towards self-realization. And when I say self-realization, I mean self-realization with a capital S. Realization of the true self, the one self, the real self, whatever term you would like to use. That's where the human species is headed. When I say we're at the point of maximal darkness, by point, I don't mean this second, this minute, this hour, or this day, or even this year. By point, I mean most likely it's probably going to be a period of several years where this kind of purification is going to be quite intense. I use the word point because from an evolutionary perspective, from Source's perspective, where planning is taking place over billions of years, that's the frame of reference that's being used. A few years of linear time on Earth is just a point, relatively speaking. But I think from our perception of linear time, it's going to be quite intense for at least several years. Again, the important point, if we're at the point of maximal darkness of the shadow, and I believe that we are, then we are one step away from dissolution of the shadow. So this is intended to be a message of hope, and I hope you will share it with others in your life who are distressed by what's going on in the news these days.
Yeah, and I'd like to share a channeling from the Beings of Light on Ascension. It's called Ascension. And here's what they say. There is much that is arising on your third dimensional plane that triggers fear in people. This is actually the opportunity for a great blessing, because for some people, this intense fear will cause a release and a surrender to evolution from within this sense of the overwhelming. That which you feel may destroy your world can actually provide the impetus for the ultimate point of your world, awakening. Just as the heightened anxiety and fear within a nightmare can bring the dreamer out of the dream, so too can the apparent chaos in your world and the fear that it elicits contain the potential jolt that serves to encourage the personality to surrender to the vastness and ultimately the true safety of the depths of the oneness within. There is much that is being drawn out in your world. Just as a boil may come to the surface of the skin, or poison may be drawn out of a wound, the human collective mind is awash with many poisons, which spirit is currently attempting to draw out. However, many of you forget this bigger picture and instead only focus on the poisons themselves. Indeed, the very fact that these poisons are so prevalent in your world is positive evidence of the collective body of humanity purging these poisons from within itself. If you perceive poisons within the world, realize that they cannot be remedied with adversarial energy. The only antidote is love. Adversarial energy always creates more of the very thing it opposes. So be very mindful of how you yourself may be introducing poison into the world. If you perceive darkness in the world, do not fight the darkness, as the fight itself will inherently contain elements of the darkness. Instead, shine light intensely, bravely, and with relentless love. Create so much illumination around the pockets of darkness that it is clear for all to see what those pockets are, and they will dissolve in the power of this glaring brilliance. Also allow for grace and forgiveness for yourself if you are temporarily overcome by the ego during this collective process of purging. And remember that to judge yourself is the same as to judge others, as there is really only the one. And finally, a dear part of us, who some of you call Jesus, has this to share. I did not teach the people by rooting out the darkness within them. I taught the people by seeing even the faintest spark of light within them and nurturing and fanning that spark until they themselves could begin to perceive it and continue to stoke the fire from within. Always know our love is truly with you because our love truly is you. So that's what the beings of light have to say about ascension. And one other thing I want to mention about the purification process and what Rob said in terms of how to deal with the purification process as it comes up in your own life is that it's important as these old energies come up, as these old emotions and mental thought patterns come up. It's important that you recognize that they're not really about what's going on in the present. So generally, how they're going to show up is that something currently going on in your life is going to serve as a trigger, and it's going to bring up this old issue, this old energy. And then the mind is going to go into some story about how what's going on right here and now is the reason why you're feeling that way. And if you believe completely in that story and you let that story completely take over, you will lose out on the opportunity to clear that energy, because what will happen is the mind will just be fueling that same energy pattern. So while that energy pattern is up and expressing, and you have that opportunity to release it, the challenge is the mind is there spinning this narrative that fuels and re-energizes it so it doesn't actually dissipate. And the beings of light have given a really good analogy to visualize this. They say to imagine one of those emergency flashlights. So, those flashlights that you maybe have, down in the basement for a tornado or other emergency, where the flashlight has a battery, but it also has a hand crank on it, so that if the battery discharges, you can crank it and you can keep the flashlight working in that way. Well, that is what happens, the relationship between emotion and mental thought patterns is a lot of times these mental thought patterns act as a hand crank that keeps re-energizing the battery. So if you think of it this way, the old energy comes up, that's the flashlight turning on, that's the battery kind of looking to discharge its energy. But the challenge is that the mind starts in with this story justifying this emotion and feeling and why you should be feeling all these things. And so it keeps cranking that crank. So while the battery could be discharging if the crank weren't going, in this instance, it's being refueled. So I'm going to send out also in the follow-up email a couple of other really great channelings. One's called Weeds and Seeds, and that really gives a wonderful analogy for how thoughts and emotions relate to one another. And the other is called Layers of Awareness. And that also gives you a perspective about how you can relate to your own thoughts and emotions and recognize that you really aren't those thoughts and emotions. You are the awareness or the consciousness that has awareness of those thoughts and emotions. So just because, a thought or emotion comes up, you don't have to engage your identity with it.
Okay. Are we going into questions now, or the book excerpt? Or...
Well, do we want to do a few of the, Stephanie, do you want to pull out a few of the themes that showed up in the
I've got a few I picked out, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll take some of these submitted questions now. Someone wrote and asked, what happens if I don't fulfill my life plan? So first, a point of clarification. It's not a life plan, it's a set of life plans. And some of you have heard this analogy before. This comes from the Beings of Light. They talk about a complete set of pre-birth plans being like a sheet of paper. So in that analogy, each one of you has your own stack of sheets of paper. The sheets at the top of the stack are the highest vibrational pre-birth plans. That's where most of the learning is done, through love, peace, and joy, not so much through pain and suffering. The sheets at the bottom of the stack, it's just the opposite. Most of the learning is through pain and suffering, not so much through love, peace, and joy. So you determine through the use of your free will which sheet of paper you're on at any given moment in time. Essentially, anything you do to raise your vibration moves you up in the stack of sheets of paper. If you lower your vibration, you go down. There are many, many different ways to raise or lower your vibration. But the most powerful, simple to keep in mind is love. Anytime you have to make any decision, no matter how big or small, ask yourself the following question. What would love, with a capital L, do now? Whatever that is, do that. The more often and the more consistently you can live life in that manner, you'll shoot right up your stack of sheets of paper. Now, to come back to the question, what happens if I don't fulfill my life plan? It's very common not to fulfill everything, but the odds are quite good that you will fulfill most, if not all, of your major pre-birth intentions. Your guides are quite good at making that happen, or helping you to make that happen. It does happen, and it's not rare, that somebody will have a lifetime in which they later feel that something major was not done that they wanted to do. And if that's the case, there will be no judgment of that, except possibly by you. In your life review, you might judge yourself, but your guides will never judge you. Your higher self will never judge you. Your council of elders doesn't judge you. Source doesn't judge you. If there's any judgment at all, it would come from you. If you leave some important part of the plan unfulfilled, the attitude your soul will have, it's not an attitude, it's a feeling of incompletion, and that's it. There will be a feeling of incompletion and a desire to complete what was left incomplete. And if you feel that way yourself, then you will likely reincarnate with a new set of pre-birth plans that includes whatever was left incomplete. But as far as your soul is concerned, there's no judgment, there's no shame in that. It's just part of the incarnational process on planet Earth. Someone writes, could you share views about a loss through suicide of someone very close? It seems so out of character, no warning or message. For those of you who have lost somebody you love to suicide, or just want to read more about that subject from a pre-birth planning perspective, there's an entire chapter in my second book, Your Soul's Gift, about the pre-birth planning of suicide. Yes, it is part of a pre-birth plan. What Jesus tells us in that chapter is that it is never planned as a certainty, but it is planned as a possibility, a probability, or rarely a probability so high as to be almost certain. There's much more in that chapter than I have time to cover now, but I want to talk about one particular part of the chapter, and this is actually pages 410 to 411. If you've lost someone you love to suicide, read at least those 2 pages. What comes up in those 2 pages is the idea that every suicide that could have been prevented was prevented. That statement comes directly from Jesus. Now, why is he saying that? So we go on in the channeling session, and what he explains is that if a suicidal person has the slightest openness or willingness to change their mind, spirit knows and spirit stages an intervention. That means, in turn, that if a suicide was completed, the person had no openness or willingness to change their mind, which means that no intervention could have been staged. So what that in turn means is that if you lost somebody you care about to suicide, there was literally nothing you could have done to prevent it, because the person had no openness or willingness to change their mind. If they had, spirit would have staged an intervention. This idea is explored in much, much greater detail on pages 410 to 411 of Your Soul's Gift. If our birth is pre-planned, then can you throw some light on the concept of free will? I think I can. Here's a hypothetical story that I think will help with that. Let's say that there is a soul, and I'll arbitrarily call this soul Sally, who has had a number of past lives in which she made certain plans before coming into body. And then when she got here, she put those aside in order to please others. She deferred to the wishes of others. Not an uncommon thing to do in the Earth School. So when Sally has her life review after those lifetimes, she will see that she has this tendency to defer to the wishes of others, and she will be motivated to heal that. So she resolves to energetically bring back into body in the next lifetime the tendency to defer to the wishes of others. That is one of her primary pre-birth intentions. Now, let's say that there's another soul in Sally's soul group. I'll call this soul George. And George has had the opposite tendency. George has had a number of incarnations in which he exercised power over others inappropriately. He dominated others. He told them how to live their lives. When he has his life review at the end of those lifetimes, he will see this tendency and he will be motivated to heal it. So he resolves to bring back into body energetically the tendency to exercise power over others inappropriately, not for the purpose of expressing it, but for the purpose of healing it. So that's his plan. Now, because they're in the same soul group, Sally knows about George's pre-birth plans. So she goes to him before either one of them is born, and she says something like, "Hey, George, I'm taking back into body the tendency to defer to the wishes of others for the purpose of healing it. I see that you are taking back into body energetically the opposite tendency, the tendency to dominate others, also with the intention of healing it. Why don't you and I make a pre-birth plan that we will marry, let's say at the age of 30. And although we know that this is likely to be a turbulent relationship, our hope is that I will learn to stand up for myself and you will learn to respect the wishes of others." And George says, "This is great, let's do it." And so that's their plan. Now let's say that when Sally is in body and let's say 26 years old, she gets a job with an employer who runs roughshod over her, treats her with a profound lack of respect and kindness. And let's say that she marshals her internal resources and she takes a stand. She says to her boss, "Stop. You may not treat me this way. If you want me to continue working here, you must treat me with respect and kindness." In the moment Sally takes a stand like that, there's a tremendous increase in her vibration. If she can sustain the heightened vibration until she's age 30, now one of two things is going to happen with George. Either they never meet because her vibration is up here, his is here, by virtue of the law of attraction, they go right by each other. Or if they do meet, they have one date and then nothing comes of it. Again, because their vibrations are so dissimilar, there simply wouldn't be any attraction. So in this hypothetical story, Sally has used her free will to learn the planned lesson to stand up for herself, which in turn obviates the need for the planned challenge, the turbulent marriage. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, well, what about George? Doesn't he still have to learn his lesson? Yes, he does. And so George will draw to himself another relationship or some life situation or set of circumstances that will give him the opportunity to respect the wishes of others. And if he doesn't learn it then, something else will come along, most likely in more intense form. And if he doesn't learn it then, something else will come along, most likely in more intense form. And it will probably keep going like that until George wakes up, realizes consciously what the lesson is, and chooses through his free will to learn it. But in this example, you see that there's this very intricate and elegant interaction and intersection between pre-birth planning and free will. They work together.
Yeah, and the pre-birth planning is so complex and multi-layered that the human mind really can't grasp it, because all of these contingencies are kind of, accounted for. So there are different, variations of the plans based on, likely free will decisions, as well as the fact that's even within one set of life plans, that is that like vibrational layer, the thickness of a sheet of paper. And then you compound on top of that as your vibration shifts, you're accessing whole new sets of life plans. So it's really, it's sort of boggling to try to think of the complexity of the planning that occurs.
Someone else writes, if you can't remember your life plan, how can you try to stay on track using your free will? This is a great question. This person, without even realizing it, has already answered their own question, because the question itself implies an intention to stay on track. You stay on track by intending to stay on track. So whoever asked this is already doing exactly what they would like to know how to do. But beyond that, look for things like aspiration and inspiration. Your soul guides you and communicates with you through aspiration and inspiration, the things you aspire to do and the things you feel inspired by. Also look for feelings of excitement or joy when you're doing something or just thinking about whether to do something. Excitement and joy are communications direct from your soul saying, yes, this is the way for you. In our society, we have a very narrow definition of excitement, and we think of it as something like the feeling you get on a roller coaster, or maybe something sexual. And yes, those are forms of excitement. That's not the kind of excitement I'm talking about. I'm talking about a visceral, gut level, yes, this is for me. I know that this is for me. That kind of excitement is coming from your soul. Did we plan for spiritual awakening in the pre-birth plan, or does it happen based on our soul advancement? Yes and yes. There's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning of spiritual awakening in Your Soul's Gift. And I actually share in that chapter the story of my own spiritual awakening. I'm not going to go into it tonight. We don't have time, but take a look at that chapter. It's very much part of a pre-birth plan. Someone else writes, do we have an opportunity to change our soul plans after we incarnate? Yes, this happens all the time. And the way it happens is that when you are asleep at night, you and many of the other significant people in your life leave the physical body, you cross back over to the other side in the astral or spirit body, and then you meet there and you essentially ask one question, which is, are we learning what we came to learn? If the answer to that question is yes, then carry on. If the answer to that question is no, then you have a discussion about what changes do you need to make so that you can all learn what you came to learn. Pre-birth plans get amended all the time in that way. Is the date set for us to go back to the other side before we come to body, or depending on what we do, several dates possible? Several dates possible. These are what are sometimes called exit points. Sylvia Browne wrote a lot about this if you want to look at her books. My understanding is that everybody has several pre-planned exit points. When would you take one? Well, essentially under one of two sets of circumstances. The first being you have fulfilled all of your major pre-birth intentions. You did what you came here to do. You learned what you came here to learn. It's time to go home. The second set of circumstances is the opposite of that. Your soul concludes, for whatever reasons, that you will not be able to do what you came to do or learn what you came to learn. And the soul is not interested in wasting energy or time. It's then time to come home and plan another life in which you can complete your pre-birth intentions. Liesel, anything you want to add, or should I go into the excerpt?
Well, another thing that I want to add is at this particular time in the world, and the ascension time, there are, there have been planned exit points for people because beings are because souls are very intentional on which side of the veil they want to be during this process, and in which side of the veil they feel they can serve best. And actually, there are some instances, we've noticed this in our workshops. There are instances where two people are very close to one another. So maybe in some form of a close relationship, like a mother-daughter, a husband-wife, and one of them passes, and the other one remains in body. And then what happens is there's kind of this overlaying a little bit of their energies. There's this deep connection made where the one that has passed is now communicating or sharing through the one that is still incarnate. And this seems to be something that is happening, I think, in particular in reference to the ascension process. It's this way in which two souls are kind of joining to be most effective during this time, and one is still in body and one has transitioned, but they were very close to one another when the one that has transitioned was still alive. So I share that just for any of you that have lost someone close to you, to just be open to that potential and that potential connection. And on that note, I can say I have a very different perspective on death than most people do, because when my father passed, he passed in hospice, and I was there when he passed. And afterwards, I felt the sense of him in my energy field. Of course, I had lots of grief and, the sense of loss and lots of crying that happened. But as the days and months went on afterwards, I felt his presence in my energy field in some ways merged with my own, this sense of him here with me, in my heart space. And I can say that I felt so very close to him. I felt this deep, profound love and connection. And I felt close to him in a way that I actually didn't while he was alive. And so I share that just to give a different perspective on death and passing, and that there are possibilities for a different kind of connection. And I know that you can't, hug the other person and have some of the connection that you can have when two people are in physical bodies, but there are other kinds of really beautiful connections that you can have that are harder when two people are in physical bodies. So I just wanted to share that perspective with those of you who have lost someone.
So Liesel and I have a new book coming out probably sometime early next year. We have not chosen a title yet. It's a collection of channelings through Liesel of the beings of light. And each channeling is then followed by a section that we call Rob's Reflections, in which I reflect on whatever came to me when I read the channeling. So we wanted to share with you an excerpt from the new book. This particular BOL channeling is called The Sweetness of Life. Think of every moment in life and every being and form you encounter as a piece of candy, the most amazing and perfectly sweet candy. Yet, the inherent amazing sweetness of the candy is disguised with a thin coating that surrounds the divine nectar contained within. This coating is life at the surface, three-dimensional level. This coating is what you perceive as physical forms and physical beings in the world. This coating is the personality level of everyone you interact with in your daily life. This coating is your own personality, your own mental and emotional structuring. When you first take life in, you encounter these coatings. Based on your own coating, you then perceive many of these coatings as bitter or sour or bland, as something you do not wish to taste, so you spit life out. Spitting life out is rejecting what already is in the present moment. It is being in a state of resistance and non-acceptance to the forms and beings you are encountering in the now moment, because the coating of those forms and beings is perceived as unpleasant by you. Yet, because you then proceed to spit out life as it is unfolding in front of you, you actually prevent yourself from having the opportunity to perceive beyond this thin coating, to taste the profound sweetness that it conceals. You spit out life before it can reveal its heavenly ambrosia to you, which is the formless essence of all external forms and all physical beings. It is the infinite and incredible love light field that lies just beyond the coating at the surface level. Actually, even in those relatively rare moments when the coating has a sweetness to it, the sweetness of the coating is both fleeting and unsatisfying, like a sugar high, and pales in comparison to the nourishing divine nectar contained beyond the coating. This love light field that lies just beyond the coating of all you encounter also lies within you, just beyond your coating. Unfortunately, you have come to believe that you are your coating, that you are all your mental and emotional structuring, and therefore you do not venture beyond this layer. However, when you surrender within, when you open to the possibility that you are more than this coating, when you begin to realize that you are the conscious awareness that can perceive these mental and emotional structures, you begin to open fissures in the coating for your truest nature to flow through. As you become more and more willing to let go of your rigid grip on the coating as representing who you are, you begin to align with your true self, which is unbounded love, light, peace, and joy. Your higher self is then able to flow within you and into the world because you have stopped blocking it through a complete belief in and identification with a false self. As you stop spitting life out as it unfolds in front of you, the truth of who you are, which is profound love, can recognize and resonate with the truth of the forms and beings in the now moment that are also this same profound love. The infinite sweetness of life is all around you and deep within you. We urge you to have the perseverance to go beyond the coatings you encounter, both externally and internally, so that you can taste this divine sweetness. Through doing so, discover the ultimate truth of who you are and the ultimate truth of who and what all beings and forms are. This ultimate truth and the ecstatic love, peace, and joy contained within it await you with open arms. So that's what the beings of light had to say about the sweetness of life. And then here's the reflection that I wrote. When I was a sophomore in college, I took a quarter off to do volunteer work in the inner city. One of my jobs was to teach GED, high school equivalency classes, to inmates at the county jail. When I arrived on my first day, an armed guard unlocked a bolted steel door to admit me to the main area of the jail. Another armed guard then escorted me down a long, bleak, fluorescent lit hallway to another bolted steel door. I was then admitted to what would be my classroom. Some minutes later, the guard returned with my only student, a very large, muscular man, I'll call him Jim, in his 20s. In no way am I embellishing this story when I say that Jim had a black patch over one eye and massive bulging biceps accentuated by an overly tight muscle shirt, one of his biceps bearing a tattoo of a dagger. I was afraid. The guard deposited Jim in the chair next to me. Then, much to my surprise and dismay, the guard left the room, locking the deadbolt behind him. Through a small window in the door, I saw that he had stationed himself just outside my classroom. It occurred to me in that moment that if Jim wanted to harm me, he would surely be able to do so before the guard could re-enter the room. Now I was really afraid. The school lesson for this day was how to add and subtract fractions, something I had learned years earlier and considered simple and easy. Jim, however, had difficulty grasping the concepts. Though I tried to hide my impatience, he sensed it. Looking at me with his one good eye, Jim said calmly, "Be patient with me, I'll get it." That was all I needed to hear. In that instant, all fear evaporated. I relaxed completely. I stopped reacting to Jim's coding and started responding to him as a human being. I respected both his desire to learn and his respect for his own intelligence. And I felt grateful to him for being kind and patient with me. Jim was right. He got the basics of adding and subtracting fractions that day. Over the years, I've thought from time to time about Jim and what he taught me about codings. There were 2 teachers and 2 students in that room in the jail. And behind those dual roles Jim and I played for each other, there was just sweetness, the sweetness of life. I still taste it to this day. So a personal story there about codings and the sweetness of life. Should we go to, let's talk about upcoming workshops first. So we have 2 offerings in November. November 5th is the Between Lives Soul Regression online workshop in English only. If you're not familiar with the BLSR, the Between Lives Soul Regression, the process takes about 2 hours. We start with some preliminary steps to help you relax physically and then mentally. And then I guide everybody into a past life. It's almost always a past life that had a big impact on the plans for the current lifetime and or is thematically related to the current lifetime. You experience 4 different scenes in the past life, the last of which is the death scene. The portion of your consciousness that is having the experience leaves the body in the death scene and crosses back over to the other side, which I know sounds ominous. There's actually nothing to it. It's very gentle and very easy. When you get back to the other side, somebody or some group of beings will greet you, most likely a spirit guide. You'll talk with whoever greets you about why you were shown that particular past life, what's important to know about it, and why it's relevant to your current lifetime. And then whoever you're speaking with will take you to what is called your Council of Elders. The council consists of the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. They know literally everything about you, every past life you've had, and everything about the plans for the current lifetime. Now, when the group gets in front of their respective councils, I prompt everybody to ask a very long and very extensive series of questions that covers all the major areas of your life. You can deviate from that script anytime you want to ask your own questions. You can do that the whole time if you want to, but you're safe sticking with the questions I'll prompt the group to ask. They're quite comprehensive. By the time we're done, you should have a much better idea of what you planned for this lifetime, why you made those plans, how you're doing in terms of fulfilling your plans, and how you can better fulfill your plans. So the process again takes about 2 hours. We break for 90 minutes. That's to give you time to get something to eat and to journal about your experience. And then we come back for a couple hours of sharing and discussion and question and answer. And that will be on November 5th. It starts with a meditation at 9:30 a.m. US Eastern Time. The regression itself starts at 10 a.m. US Eastern Time. And I think that's everything that's important about it.
Well, one other thing I want to share about the Between Lives soul regression is I think one of, even more importantly than the information you may get, from the council about, your life plan, et cetera. I think one of the most powerful things that many people come away from the experience with is the experience of their true nature, their experience of themselves as a soul, their experience of God or source's love for them, the experience of their guides' love for them, the experience of the council's love for them, all of those different ways of experiencing unconditional love can be just really extremely powerful and transformative because, for many of us, it very well may be the first time you've felt anything like that. And that can be a tremendous advancement in your awareness and in your consciousness because you recognize, oh yeah, that's what's true. That's what it's all about. So I think that is one of the most powerful things that can come out of the workshop, aside from just the really cool information you can get.
Then 2 days later on November 7th, 7 to 9 p.m. US Eastern Time, is our Higher Self workshop. We explore what is a higher self. How can you bring yourself into closer communion with your higher self so that you are more receptive to the guidance and the inspiration of your higher self? And we'll lead you through a guided meditation that is intended to bring you into closer communion with your higher self. We have discount codes for you, our gift to you for being with us this evening. That will take 15% off of either of those two workshops. Stephanie, when do the codes expire?
Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time.
And are those codes in the chat box yet?
Putting them in right now on the links.
And someone is asking, how can I prepare for this to make sure I fall into a hypnotic state? Once you register for the Between Lives soul regression workshop, then you'll be sent a welcome email that includes some introductory information. It includes a recording of Rob leading a meditation that you can listen to multiple times to get used to his voice. So there's there's some preparatory tips that it will give you. And then also in the actual workshop itself, we'll also give some tips and tools to help maximize the probability of going into trance.
And if you can't make the Between Lives soul regression on November 5th, there will be another one on December 10th. You can also do it as a private session. Click on the sessions page at yoursoulsplan.com. There's a long wait, though. I think we're scheduling for April now, if I remember correctly. And then one more workshop I want to mention, December 2nd is Star Souls, most of which was channeled by Liesel. So would you like to tell people about that?
Sure. So, I have always had the knowingness that I have incarnated on a lot of different planets and in a lot of different worlds, and that Earth has always felt very foreign to me. Actually, I remember as a young child have just knowing I wasn't from here, and that that was not questioned by me. What I didn't understand was why nobody else in my life was acknowledging that. And the answer I came up with is that my parents must have been paying everybody to act like I'm just like everybody else. But so, you know, a star soul is somebody that has a lot of lifetimes, or has strong, powerful lifetimes in other worlds, on other planets, or in ancient civilizations that had connections to the stars. And this, the beings of light have given specifically a regression to help help all of us who have these lifetimes and connections, to help us wake up even more to what gifts and connections we've brought into this lifetime, because it can be so challenging for us to be here on Earth that we're just busy trying to survive. But this regression is meant to take you deep into trance and help you activate and wake up those latent gifts and the plan that you had, you know, when you decided to come here to Earth, and help you learn how to best support yourself in the world, and how to, you know, how to best serve in the way that you wanted to serve when you decided to incarnate here.